And now we're recording. Today is August 25th, 2020, and I'm here with Barbara and Tom. I'm Kevin, and today's topic is neighbors. And so you grew up in Waukegan on Cornelia Avenue, and you had quite a few neighbors. How were they?
Well, I really got to know the neighbors. I was a kid, 10, 12, 15 years old. I went, even while I was in college, I came back summers. So I lived on Cornelia Avenue in Waukegan, Illinois for a long time. And I was paper boy for that for about 3 years. I was the paper boy for that street and Jenkins and Court and Brookside as well. So I got to know people very well. We didn't have television. We didn't have air conditioning. Kids weren't allowed to play in their houses. It was a rare thing if we went over to somebody's house. We were too roughnecks, we'd mess things up. So we were made to play outside. And we had to make up games and figure out things to do and ride our bikes. And
Even in the winter? Even in the winter?
Well, in the winter, whenever possible, we'd be out there in the snowballs, building forts out of snow and playing a lot more than kids do today. The boys did, I think, maybe more than girls did. Girls were kind of protected, and they weren't allowed to go off on their bikes just anywhere. And so my sisters didn't know Waukegan very well at all. And of course, I was a mail carrier, so I knew the whole city by the time I left there. I was a summer mail carrier to work through college. But back to Cornelia Avenue, the Botchers lived at the end of the street. They were German born. They had one daughter, Irene, I remember her name. She played the harp in the City Philharmonic that was over at the high school. And she was, we had a musician. And then we had two school teachers, Mr. Waldorf, my favorite teacher, I think, of all my years was Mr. Waldorf, and he lived right next door to us on Cornelia Avenue. And then my best friend in my teenage years was Gene Fortier, and his father, Gene Fortier Sr., was a high school teacher. And then we had a principal down the street, Mr. Pritchard, who was the principal of West Side Elementary School. So it was a very nice street with a lot of variety. We had a Jewish neighbor next door to us. And so I think it was a good place to grow up. It was a dead end street, so we didn't have a lot of traffic. We could play in the street, play softball in the street without being interrupted by cars all the time. So it was very nice, and everybody knew everybody, and especially I did. The young boys, we were in Boy Scouts together. Our patrol was the Wolf Patrol, and we were all from Cornelia Avenue. So it was a very close-knit, but various ethnic groups. We didn't have any black people, of course. Blacks were in the ghetto down on Market Street, but we did have different religions, and I think we were the only Catholics there until Uncle Pat and Gert moved in to our old house when we moved to the bigger house. And so we even had relatives living on the street, an aunt and uncle and cousins. And I married the girl next door. So it was a really nice neighborhood for growing up. But after I got done with college, my first job was in Chillocothe, Illinois, near Peoria. And we went there, and they found a house for us right on the main street in an apartment above the hardware store. And we had a grand piano in our living room, and all the furniture, it was furnished, and we really enjoyed it, but we wanted a real home. So when one opened up on a street of new kind of prefab houses and that had been built after World War II, we moved in on Barron Avenue. And that's where Dan was born. So we get, and then, so we lived there for, I think, 2.5 years only that we were in Chillicothe, but we know everybody in that town too, because I was a teacher. And when the principal first day there took us on a tour of the city in his car, he was waving out the window at the people. And then he'd wave at them over on the other side of the street. And we thought that was funny. And Marilyn and I, after he left and we were in our own car, we'd say, well, you wave on the right and I'll wave on the left. And we'd wave at everybody. But everybody knew we were there. Oh, you're the new teacher. And so it was, and the postmaster gave me a job for the summer. So I got a summer paycheck. Pay was miserable and I needed a summer job and I got to work there. So
How big was the town?
I think 3,000 maybe at the most. And
And
I was vice president of the junior, what do they call it? Junior Chamber of Commerce, in charge of external activities. And I ran a campaign for everybody to get a garbage can, a proper garbage can, so that we could keep the rats under control and dispose of our garbage properly.
It's on a lake. I never knew that. Here's a map, and you can see it if we zoom in.
Where Chillicothe is located.
Yeah, north of Peoria. Peoria is
North
down
of
here.
Peoria, about 20
It's
miles.
on Goose Lake.
Goose Lake?
No, there wasn't any, well, not when I was there anyway. We did go out to the garbage dump and the teenagers would take 22s and shoot the rats at the garbage dump. So our campaign was to control the rats and get our garbage properly to take it. We didn't have garbage pickup. People had to dispose of their own garbage. And so it was just a very small town. It had very few services, but
Cemetery?
it had a high school, Chili High,
Chili High.
Chili High, and they were the champions for 16 of the league, football league, 16 seasons. They won the championship in a row. So the football coach was God on campus.
Now it's 6,000.
6,000.
So it's doubled, but.
Yeah, well,
all these,
20 miles from Peoria, which was a big city and had Caterpillar tractor. And so I'm sure that it spilled out as after World War II, but we left and went to went back near Waukegan to Elgin. And I think that's where Kevin can remember. He was then, like 4 years old. And we had 4 kids. Ginger was born there in Meadowdale. And Murray was born in Waukegan because we went and lived with Grandma in the house where Barbara, Marilyn was the girl next door. And her mother lived there. And we went and lived with her in the summer and I carried mail. And so I could make some money. And then Marie was supposed to be born in August, and she wasn't born until September 30th. And so I had to commute back and forth to Elgin for the first month. That was about 50 miles away. And finally she was born and we could move to Elgin. So we had a lot of neighborhoods, but in each neighborhood, we knew almost everybody on the block. We had interaction with them. Of course, with kids, 2 kids would go out on the street and they had kids. It was, what was the nickname of Meadowdale? Anyway, a lot of kids lived there. And Fertile Valley, that was what they called it, Fertile Valley. Everybody had a bunch of kids. It was the boomer era. And they moved out from Chicago and we moved from Chillicothe. And so we liked it there, but we only lived there 5 years. And then we moved to Elgin to be right close to the high school, less than a block away. and then we got to know all the neighbors there. So let's talk about some of the neighbors that we had in Meadowdale. Do you remember any of them, Kevin? You were like 4 or 5 years old when we left there.
We in let's see,
Meadowdale.
Meadowdale, Carpentersville.
Yeah, the town was Carpentersville, the subdivision was Meadowdale.
And we arrived, I was like 5 years old, and we left when I was 11. So that we were there for 6 years.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
so you
yeah.
did. And you went to elementary school, which was like 3 blocks down the street.
Yeah,
Everything was very handy.
yeah, it was. Yeah. Well, and then there was, let's see, the across the street, there was the Winters, I think was their name. They had the dry cleaning.
Oh, yeah,
2 kids, 3 kids, 3 boys, Jack
yeah.
and
I can't
Nikki.
remember the name. Now, this is like 30 years ago or more, I don't know, long time ago. And
55
so hard
years ago.
to remember, but there was a home across the street. They had like 4 kids. And one of the boys was kind of mentally retarded.
That was Nikki. Yeah, he was older, 16 or so. Yeah,
But he'd play with the little kids.
right. Yeah.
And he was very nice. But they had a dog, I remember, and they'd let the dog go. The kids would not keep him on a leash. They just let him run wherever. And you kids were pretty little, most of Ginger was just 5 years old when we left there. She was born when we first moved in there. So the dog had knocked the little kids over. It was so rambunctious. So I told, what was his name, Ricky?
Well, Nikki, and then there was Jackie.
Yeah.
Jackie was younger, but he was like kind of the leader of the 3. Yeah.
And they were older than you were.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to control the dog, and I asked them, they didn't know how to, I guess. But I told them that we kept a lion down in our basement. And we were really worried that lion, if it ever got loose, it would probably eat that dog in one bite. And the kids believed me because I was an adult, and adults don't lie, but I was lying. And they went home and told their parents that the Ryans have a lion in their basement. And I made it ridiculous enough that the parents wouldn't believe it. So they got the message that we didn't like the dog, and please tie your dog. Instead of knocking on their door and demanding that they leash their dog, they did. And we solved that problem that way. But we had lots of wonderful interactions with the neighbors there.
Mm.
Do you remember the man next door? He was born in Finland, he and his wife. And they had a daughter, and she got divorced and came home to live with her parents. And they had a little girl. And she came over and picked our tulips and picked my tulips. And then she knocked on the door and presented the tulips as a gift. But so we had, that was a terrible thing.
Do you know that Julie did the same thing at Grandma Martha and Herman's house in St. Louis? She went next door and picked tulips and gave them to them.
She thought I was doing a nice thing. That's what the adults
You know what
do.
it is about tulips and kids.
Yeah, but yeah, and then even the people on the other side, we went camping with them to try out our camper, and they came along, and we were really close to them. They had teenagers. I remember their son was top of the class in high school. And so he was a World War II veteran. A lot of the people were World War II veterans. And then the GIs like me from Korean War time. We got GI loans, and they guaranteed our mortgages. And so we got a low interest rate because Uncle Sam would pay if we didn't pay. And everybody paid, I guess. The only thing that would cause problems is if somebody got a divorce. And one income, it never, you couldn't keep your house the way they do now when they get a divorce. It was a mortgage. It took two people to manage it. If they didn't both work, one of them had a good job and the other one couldn't keep the house. So they would sometimes lose their houses if that should happen. And it was a time, even though it was fertile valley and people had a lot of children, it was a high divorce rate, highest the U.S. had ever had. Some of the GIs came back, they were different people, and then they had a hard time making adjustments to their families. And so it was a high divorce rate time. And that was the only time it would cause people to move. And otherwise, people would stay in these houses a long time after we left. But we just wanted to be closer. I wanted to be closer to teaching instead of being 5 miles away. We had one car, and so.
When did you move to Elgin?
When I was 11.
1956, I think.
This is Cordova Road, though.
Oh, now, what it looks like now.
Yeah.
See, they said those houses that were prefabricated in Indiana and brought out on a truck would blow away in a wind. And they were up in 3 hours and they'd blow away in 10 minutes. But that wasn't true. They're still there after all these years. 1956 is when we moved to Elgin.
Well, 66 maybe? Because if Kevin was 11 when you moved to Elgin.
He was born in 56.
So 67, I think we moved to Elgin.
It must have been
67.
Yeah.
Okay, 67. And those houses are still there. They were prefabricated in Indiana and brought out on a truck. And Grandpa DeVries, he had built a house in Waukegan, even though he was a farmer, very handy farmer. And he knew about house building. And he was like 100 years old, sat in our front window and watched the workers across the street put up a house in 4 hours. They had a crane that picked up off the truck and dropped it onto the foundation that was already there. So it went up fast. We had lots of kids, and I don't know, 67 now that we moved to Elgin and
so that's your house.
I think it's
your house.
105 Cordova Road.
Yeah, he got the house.
He got the house itself. So that was a growing
It
up
still
time.
looks like a good neighborhood.
And we knew
Nice
the
house.
neighbors. But yeah, I think by now, Kevin, you're old enough, you had friends and you would know the neighbors. But now people had TV and air conditioning, and they weren't outside as much in the summertime. They would escape into their air-conditioned house. Only if the temperature outside was just terribly high did we get to go on Cornelia Avenue, get to go down the basement, which was cooler than the rest of the house because of the foundation. We played ping pong, table tennis in our basement occasionally when it got really hot. But most of the time we were outside, even in the winter, yeah.
Well, cool. And then we moved to Weston Avenue in Elgin to when I was 11.
Yeah.
And then to Dumbarton Oaks after I had when I was in college.
Right. I remember when we sold the Dumbarton Oaks townhome, you said you wouldn't come and visit us if we were going to sell the house. So as you were driving away and we were waving, we put up the sign. You weren't out of the driveway before we had a for sale sign up in the Dumbarton Oaks house, and then we moved to retirement in Colorado. So anyway, we're getting way ahead of things. You know people on the street. You're old enough to have interaction, but I think your interaction would have been different than mine because of the fact that the houses are bigger, people spend more time inside, don't talk to each other as much. I don't know, for sure.
My experience was the same when our kids were little. They went out in the morning to play, and I saw them maybe for lunch,
Yeah,
and
Stay on.
then they were off in the afternoon.
but now they're old. People are afraid they're going to get hurt. There's going to be a bad guy who's going to kidnap them or something. We have helicopter parents. So we were very free, especially the boys, that we could do. And you boys were pretty free, weren't you? And growing up in
Yeah, on Cordova Road. Yes. Yeah, we were able to. We pretty much limited to that one block on Cordova Road, but there were enough
Right.
kids. There was the Winters, and then Verborns, Joey Verborn.
oh, yes,
Yeah, and some other kids. Yeah, so there were. Yeah.
well, there's quite a few of you that walk off to school in the morning, gathering up kids as you walk down the street. The school was only like 3 blocks away, and you'd have a whole bunch of kids walking into the school all together from our street alone.
Yep.
Lots of kids. So I remember at school, oh, I know, that was the job where the teacher had taught the kids to sing songs for Christmas. And your job was to ring a bell because you couldn't sing. You still
Right.
can't sing.
Yep.
Neither can I. So there was a little bell and you had to ring it at the right time to like jingle bells or something.
Right.
And you got to ring the bell. The teacher didn't think you were qualified. You didn't realize that you had been, not instead of promoted to the bell, you had been given the bell for a reason. We knew why. Yeah, and so we would go to those PTA meetings.
Okay, well, good. This sounds like a good place to wrap it up.
Okay.
And
All right.
thank you very much. And we'll,
All right, thank you.
okay. Oh, recording. Sorry, recording's not showing up.